The doorbell rang on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Through the peephole, the world warped and condensed into three familiar faces I hadn't seen in over a year. My father's stern expression, my mother's nervous smile, my brother's averted gaze. My hand froze on the deadbolt. A year of silence, of grief, of rebuilding myself from the ashes of their rejection, all led to this single, silent moment on my doorstep. And the only thought in my mind was a quiet, steady question. What words could possibly be left to say? My family was built on a foundation of appearances. We were the kind of family that looked perfect in a holiday photo. My father, a retired accountant, believed in order, legacy, and the quiet accumulation of wealth. My mother believed in keeping up with the neighbors. And my younger brother, Mark, was the golden child, the son who would carry the family name forward. I was the practical one. Sarah, the daughter who became a nurse, who chose a stable, caring profession over something more prestigious. I married David, a kind, soft-spoken teacher. We lived in a comfortable, modest home we were slowly paying off. We were happy. To my parents, however, our happiness seemed small. They saw our life as a stepping stone to something grander, something that better reflected their own status. The fault line was always there, hidden beneath expensive birthday gifts and carefully worded advice. It was the unspoken expectation that we should be striving for more. A bigger house, a fancier car, private schools for the children we didn't yet have. David and I were content. We valued time over money, peace over prestige. This, I see now, was our greatest sin in their eyes. We weren't playing the game. The crack became a chasm over my grandmother's inheritance. She was my mother's mother, a wonderful, warm woman who had always seen me for who I was. She left me her small coastal cottage. It wasn't about the money. The place was old and needed work. It was about the memories. Summers spent there with her were the happiest of my childhood. She left it to me because she knew I was the only one who would love it, truly love it, for what it was. My family was furious. They saw the cottage as an asset to be sold. Its value split to fund more sensible ventures. My father called it a sentimental mistake. My mother said Grandma was not in her right mind at the end. Mark argued that as the one with a family to think about, he had a wife and 2 children. He was more entitled to the financial boost. We had one terrible final meeting in my parents' immaculate living room. The air smelled of lemon polish and tension. "Be reasonable, Sarah," my father said, his voice like cold steel. "Sell the cottage. Divide the proceeds. It's what's fair for the family." I looked at their faces, set in identical masks of entitlement. I thought of my grandmother's hands, gnarled from gardening, handing me a shell on the beach. I thought of the love she had poured into that place. "No," I said, my voice quiet but clear. And just like that, the door to my family slammed shut. The first month was the hardest. It was a quiet, echoing kind of pain. I kept expecting the phone to ring, for one of them to apologize. It never happened. Birthdays passed without a card. The holidays that year were a hollow affair, just David and me with a small turkey. The silence in the house, a stark contrast to the usual noisy, stressful gatherings. The social pressure was subtle but constant. Mutual friends would ask, "How are your parents?" And I'd have to invent a flimsy excuse. I saw the pity in their eyes. I felt judged, as if I must have done something truly awful to deserve such a punishment. I was grieving for the living. And it was a lonely, confusing process. David was my rock. He never once said, "I told you so," even though he had never felt fully accepted by them. He just held me when I cried, and quietly took on more chores when the weight of it all made it hard to get out of bed. We started spending weekends at the cottage. It was a refuge. The salt-scoured wood, the sound of the waves, the smell of damp earth and old books, it healed me piece by piece. We poured our love into that place. With our own hands, we repaired the deck, painted the shutters, cleared the overgrown garden. It was hard work, but it was honest. With every brushstroke, every weed pulled, I was reclaiming not just a house, but myself. I was no longer the daughter who failed to meet expectations. I was a woman building her own life, on her own terms. The financial strain was real. We had to budget carefully, but the emotional reward was a currency my family would never understand. A year to the day after we were cut off, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a cousin I was still on speaking terms with. It was brief, and it changed everything. Heard about Mark. His business partner ran off with everything. He's in deep financial trouble. Lost a lot of Dad's investments, too. Thought you should know. I read the message 3 times, sitting at the kitchen table in the cottage. The morning sun streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. This wasn't a message of gossip. It was an explanation. Their pride, their obsession with wealth and status, had backfired spectacularly. The golden child had tarnished and taken the family fortune with him. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt a profound sense of clarity. Their world, the world of appearances and assets, had crumbled. And mine, the world I had been forced to build for myself, was standing strong. The power balance had shifted, not because of anything I had done to them, but because of what they had done to themselves. I knew they would come. Desperation has a way of erasing pride, at least temporarily. The text from my cousin was a warning shot. I talked to David that evening. We sat on the deck, listening to the waves, and I told him everything. "What do you want to do?" he asked, his hand covering mine. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I know I won't be their safety net. I won't sell this place to bail out Mark's mistakes." We decided on a course of action. It wasn't vengeful. It was protective. I went to a lawyer, a friend of a friend, and had a simple document drawn up. It wasn't a lawsuit or a threat. It was a statement of fact, a boundary made legal and solid. I also gathered our financial records, not to flaunt, but to have a clear, unemotional picture of what was truly mine. I didn't practice a speech. I didn't plan what I would say. I just made sure that when they arrived, and I felt in my bones that they would, I would be operating from a place of strength and truth, not from the raw emotion they had always exploited. I was ready to listen, but I was no longer the pleading daughter they had dismissed a year ago. And then the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, smoothed my shirt, and opened the door. The 3 of them stood there, a portrait of faded grandeur. My father looked older, the lines on his face deeper. My mother's smile was tight, her eyes darting around, taking in our well-kept home. "Sarah," my father began, his voice lacking its usual command. "We need to talk." I didn't invite them in. I simply waited on the doorstep. He cleared his throat. "There have been some financial difficulties. Mark's business, it's a mess. We need your help." My mother chimed in, her voice brittle. "That cottage, dear, it's the only liquid asset big enough to solve this. If we sell it quickly, we can save the family from ruin." I looked at Mark. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at his shoes. There it was. The ask. Exactly as predicted. They hadn't come to apologize. They hadn't come to reconcile. They had come because they saw my sanctuary, my inheritance, as their emergency fund. My father mistook my silence for hesitation. "It's the right thing to do, Sarah, for the family." I looked at each of them, my gaze steady. I felt a surge of all the old pain, the betrayal, the loneliness. But on top of it was a new solid layer of peace. I had my answer ready. It wasn't in the document in the house or in a rehearsed speech. It was one word. The same word I had said to them over a year ago, but this time it came from a completely different place within me. A place of strength, not defiance. A place of finality. I looked my father in the eye. No. The silence was absolute. My mother's face crumpled. My father's went pale with a kind of stunned fury. They sputtered. They tried to guilt me, to shame me, but I just stood there, calm. I told them the cottage was legally, morally, and emotionally mine. I told them their problems were not mine to solve. I did not raise my voice. I simply held my ground. They left soon after, the engine of their expensive car roaring in frustration as they pulled away. I watched them go, and I felt light. The chain that had bound me to their conditional love had finally snapped. I did see them again, eventually, at a cousin's wedding a few months later. We were civil, distant. The dynamic was forever changed. They knew I was no longer a resource to be managed. I had become my own person. I learned that family isn't a transaction. It's not about what you can provide or how well you conform. It's a bond that should be built on mutual respect and unconditional love. Sometimes, the most powerful word you can say, the word that truly defines your boundaries and your self-worth, is also the simplest. The quietest no can be a more powerful declaration of self than the loudest yes. If this real-life story resonated with you, please share your own thoughts in the comments below. For more calm, reflective stories about navigating life's difficult moments, like and subscribe. Thank you for listening.